The taxman's taken all my dough and left me in my stately home.
In 1966, London was at the heart of a cultural transformation. The vibrant music scene brought strangers together, bridging divides and creating a shared rhythm that sparked creativity everywhere you turned. But for Diane, the rhythm of her own life felt out of sync. That afternoon, Diane sat in a Soho cafe, struggling to concentrate, still reeling from her parents' reaction to her plans to marry Charlie, her notebook open but blank. The Beatles' Paperback Writer crackled over the speakers, the lyrics mocking her efforts. Charlie's new job was supposed to start soon. Once it did, everything would fall into place. She should have been writing when the Hollies' latest single Bus Stop came on, but her thoughts were elsewhere. "What's got you in a twist today?" a voice interrupted her frantic thoughts. Diane looked up to see a grinning man with long hair in sunglasses standing there, seeming genuinely interested. Diane hesitated, but found herself speaking as if she somehow knew him. "I had a fight with my parents. They think my fiancé is bad news. They don't see his potential. He's ambitious, you know. He's just had a rough start." "I see. When my first love, Sue, got pregnant, we wanted to get married, but our parents said we were too young, and they split us up. I was a rebellious, angry kid anyway, but that had a profound effect on me. I was full of rage. I had a little green amplifier that was sounding crap. I thought, I'll teach it, and slashed the speaker cone. Anyway, it all turned out fine." The man grinned. "Ambition's all well and good, but it doesn't pay the rent, does it?" "He's starting a job soon," Diane said defensively. He shrugged. "Hope so. Just make sure you're not the one footing the bill if ambition takes a detour." Before she could respond, he smiled and said, "Take care of yourself, love." He nodded and disappeared out the door. Only later did she realize in her haze she failed to recognize Dave Davies behind those sunglasses.
You really got me going.
Every day is an endless stream of cigarettes and magazines.
Her mind drifted to the night before, when she stormed out of her parents' tidy suburban home, furious at their refusal to understand what she saw in her fiancé Charlie. She knew one day his songs would be the ones playing on the radio. "Charlie is a charming layabout," her father had declared, "and if you marry him, Diane, you'll spend the rest of your life paying for his charm." "He's a dreamer, Diane," her mother had said, "always borrowing, never paying back. If you think that changes once you're married, you're delusional."
All the lonely people, where do they all come from?
Diane was an aspiring novelist, pulling long shifts at a cafe to make ends meet. She'd learned to mine the chaos of London's streets for inspiration, scribbling down overheard fragments of conversation, sketching out characters between wiping tables, and imagining a future where her books paid the rent. Life at the moment was late-night shifts, intriguing conversations, and an endless stream of records that filled her flat with her fiancé Charlie. But this summer wasn't just about books and music. It was about tying up loose ends. Back at the flat, Charlie was tinkering with his guitar, the familiar opening riff of the Troggs' Wild Thing filling the room. Diane dumped her bag on the table, noticing the familiar mess: cups, magazines, and Charlie's jacket slung over the chair. "Good gig?" he asked without looking up. "I wasn't at a gig," Diane replied. "I was working." "Oh, right." Charlie strummed another chord, his face brightening. "Listen to this. It's going to blow people's minds." Diane forced a smile, trying to ignore the pang of frustration that knotted her stomach. Charlie was waiting for his new job to start. "Any day now," he kept saying, but the wait felt endless. Meanwhile, every extra shift she picked up at the cafe felt like a step closer to her goal, the second-hand Mini she'd been saving for. The little car would mean freedom, no more missed buses in the rain, no more scrambling to get to shifts on time, no more relying on anyone but herself. She glanced at Charlie as he turned into his guitar, oblivious to her unease. It wasn't just a car she was saving for. It was her future. Her eyes moved to his jacket slung over the chair. A crumpled receipt stuck out of the pocket. Another one from a record shop. Diane frowned. Been shopping again, nodding toward the receipt. Charlie didn't miss a beat, strumming on as if the question were rhetorical. Just a couple of singles. You've got to stay current in this business, you know. Diane reached for the receipt and flattened it out on the table. £3, it read, scrawled in ink next to the name of a shop on Denmark Street. £3, Charlie. You know I'm saving up. I'll pay you back, Charlie said, still not looking up. Once the job starts. Diane stayed quiet, unsure whether to press the issue. This wasn't the first time Charlie had borrowed a bit of her money without asking. Always just a quid here or there, always with promises of paying her back. But with her savings for the car so close to her goal, every penny mattered. Your job's starting soon, right? She asked carefully, sliding the receipt across the table. Of course, they're just sorting the paperwork. She sighed, standing and heading toward the kettle. Her gaze landed on a jar by the sink, where she kept spare coins for emergencies. She hadn't touched it in weeks, but now it looked suspiciously emptier than she'd remembered. Diane felt her pulse quicken. Had Charlie dipped into that too? You haven't by any chance borrowed from the jar, have you? She asked lightly, trying to keep her tone even. Charlie hesitated just long enough for her to notice. What? No, don't be daft. The knot in Diane's stomach tightened. She wanted to believe him, but something about the way he avoided her eyes made her feel like she was holding her breath. The stakes were growing. The Mini wasn't just a luxury, it was Diane's independence, her escape from constantly putting herself last. As Charlie hummed to himself, oblivious, Diane couldn't shake the nagging feeling that her careful plans were being sabotaged. Diane tried to ignore the pang of frustration. He was waiting for his new job to start after all. She reminded herself it was just a rough patch.
I'm walking all around the town, singing all the people down.
The next day, Diane wandered down King's Road, her thoughts tangled between frustration and doubt. The lively chaos of the market barely registered as she strolled past vendors hawking their wares. She stopped at a stall filled with scarves, running her fingers over a soft, pale green one. A man with dark hair and a bemused smile stepped up beside her, holding a colourful scarf. Think this one says mysterious, or just trying too hard? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Diane smirked and felt a flicker of familiarity. Depends on who you're trying to impress. Someone with taste, he replied dryly, folding the scarf back onto the pile. You look distracted. What's got you so glum? Diane sighed, eyeing the scarf wistfully. Must be nice to have someone shopping for you instead of themselves. Well, you don't look like the kind of girl who needs to put up with that. Is he helpful in other ways, at least? I've been paying for everything for the past few months while he's supposed to start work soon. Ah, he said knowingly. Classic. When I was about 16, the weather turned very bad, which meant my dad couldn't work. He ran through his savings. He asked to borrow the money in my post office savings book, which my grandmother saved for me during the war. It equaled about 2 weeks' pay for my dad. He took me to the post office and forced me to give it to him. A few years later, I asked him when he was going to repay me. He struck me and accused me of being ungrateful. He never did pay me back. Shortly after that, I was forced to quit school and take a job and give the money to my mother. I was only left with less than £1 a week to travel to work and have a meat roll and tea for lunch. I didn't have any choice in the matter. My advice, if it feels like you're running a charity, close up shop. Diane took the message to heart. Sound advice. Before she could thank him, he gave her a small nod and sauntered off, disappearing into the crowd. Diane shook her head, letting out a short laugh. Thanks, stranger, she muttered under her breath. As she turned back to the scarves, the vendor muttered, Crikey, that was Bill Wyman of the Rolling Stones. Diane froze, staring after him, the absurdity of the moment setting in. She laughed again as she shook her head at her dumb luck, tossing the scarf back into the pile.
Under my thumb,
I've been having a sweet dream. I've been since I woke up today. A pretty face can hide an evil mind.
That weekend they went to the Marquee Club, where Paint It Black blasted over the speakers between sets. Diane lingered near the bar, nursing a pint, while Charlie mingled. She spotted him laughing with a group near the stage, his drink in hand, and felt a twinge of unease. Later, as they walked home, Diane finally broached the subject. Any word on the job? Charlie frowned, his tone defensive. I told you, it's sorted. They're just working out the start date. It's not like I'm sitting around doing nothing. Diane nodded, though her doubt was growing. The next morning, as Stevie Wonder's Uptight, Everything's Alright played on the radio, she resolved to stop worrying. Charlie loved her, didn't he? And love meant trust.
Apple up my girl's eye. We go out stepping on the town for a while. Money's blowing my. I write a famous song. I do a big horn.
Oh, and our good time starts and ends without dollar one to spend.
A few days later, Diane found herself at a quiet tea room. She sat alone at a small table, her notebook open beside her half-empty cup of Earl Grey. Instead of writing, she was idly flipping through a newspaper, glancing at the ads for second-hand minis, when a man at the next table leaned over. "Do you mind? I run out over here," pointing to the sugar bowl. "Of course," she said, sliding it across the table. "Cheers," he replied with a warm smile, stirring his tea slowly. Diane gave him a quick nod, then returned to her paper. But out of the corner of her eye, she noticed the man studying her. He tilted his head, his expression curious. "You look like you've got half a melody stuck in your head. Something unfinished?" She smiled faintly, caught off guard by the remark. "More like planning my future, or trying to anyway." "Ah, well, the best way to predict the future is to create it," he said, setting down his spoon. She decided not to mention the Charlie situation again, as she was tired of talking about it. She smiled. "I'm writing my first book," she said, gesturing to the notebook on the table. "Mostly got character sketches, bits of dialogue, trying to capture the world around me." "You're writing a book, eh? Well, that takes some doing." Diane smiled. "You'd be amazed how much time I spend scribbling down scraps of conversation and ideas that seem brilliant in the moment but turn out to be absolute rubbish the next day." He grinned. "That's the art of it, isn't it? You have to dig through the rubbish to find the gems." "It is," Diane replied, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. "But I love it. There's something about catching that spark, you know?" "I think I do," he smiled knowingly. Diane stared at him. Before she could ask, he stood, slipping a notebook into his bag, and added, "Keep at it." He nodded and walked out the door. Diane turned to the waitress. "Was that Donovan?" I was too caught off guard to ask him. I meet so many guys at my work trying to look like musicians these days. It's hard to know who's the real deal. The woman behind the counter nodded. "He stops in from time to time." Diane blinked. Of course, she thought. She looked down at her notebook, suddenly filled with a strange mix of inspiration and doubt.
Must be the season of the wind.
Too many teardrops for one heart to be crying.
2 weeks later, Diane went to the bank to withdraw her savings. She was finally ready to take the money out to buy the second-hand Mini, her ticket to independence. But as the teller frowned at her account, Diane felt her stomach twist. "I'm sorry, miss. Your account is overdrawn," the teller said. "That's impossible," Diane stammered. "I haven't touched it." The teller slid the record across the counter. There were many withdrawals, unmistakable amounts needed for pubs, record shops, cafes, all Charlie's favourite haunts. Then the final withdrawal of the remaining balance. Every last dime she had been working for was gone. She rushed back to the flat in a daze, ready to unleash her rage and get to the bottom of this.
I am alone, gazing from my window.
As she flung open the door, she stopped dead in her tracks. His clothes, his guitar, even the battered record player he loved were all gone. The blood drained from her face, and her heart sank. Charlie had moved out. A hastily scrawled note sat on the kitchen table. Diane, I didn't want to do this, but I needed the money. I'm sorry. I'll pay you back one day. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Maybe your parents are right. You're too good for me, really. Love, Charlie. The words blurred as Diane stared at the note. She wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something. She leaned her weakening body against the wall, slowly slumping down until she reached the floor, sobbing, "Why?" The bitter sound echoed in the empty flat.
Bang, bang, my baby shot me down.
A few days later, Diane sat on a train bound for Brighton, where a friend had offered her a place to hang out to get her mind off the betrayal. She stared out the window, watching London's grey streets fade into the countryside. Sunny Afternoon by the Kinks played softly in the carriage, a mocking reminder of the summer she'd been spending alone. A man across the aisle strummed a guitar softly, humming along to the song. He caught Diane's eye and grinned. "Rough day?" "You could say that," she replied. "Let me guess. Love trouble?" "Not any more." Diane half smiled for his sake. "Good. Life's too short to waste on the wrong songs." She suddenly had a brilliant idea for her next story. Maybe Charlie had paid her back after all. Donovan's words lingered. It was time to create her future. Diane stared out the window at the passing towns, wondering what kind of life she'd almost walked into.
All I've got's this sunny afternoon.